Thanks so much for joining me today, Lynn. I really, really appreciate it. I'm super excited to meet you and kind of learn more about your inspiration and your story and some of the cool things you've done.
Thanks so much. It's really cool to be talking to you today, Mark.
And where are you right now? Where do you live?
Well, I live in Long Beach, California, but I'm on a large book tour, 46
Mm,
events for the next, actually halfway through, so something like 3 more weeks.
good
And it's
Lord.
been great. Right now I'm in the East Hampton, New York.
I'm curious, how has that worked out? Because I've launched a number of books and I've always resisted the book tour. So I've done virtual stuff like this, but I've resisted getting on the road because I didn't know if it'd be worth the time away.
It's worth the time because
Is
you
it?
make so many new contacts. You meet old friends. I saw somebody I swam with when I was 8 years old, and I saw somebody I met 20 years ago who's now an open water swimmer bringing her daughter on board.
No
And
kidding.
so you have
Okay.
these conversations that you would
Right.
never have otherwise. And it allows for so much thought and interaction that you just can't get from doing a Zoom.
Yeah, I 100% makes sense you say that. So it's more about the totality of the experience as opposed to just getting eyeballs coming to the books. I love that.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
makes all the difference. I mean, what's the difference between meeting somebody on in person and on Zoom? It's just really
Yeah. And
different.
the other thing is, so much goes into writing a book. You really throw your heart, your life, and you change, as you know, when you write a book. And so why not go out and celebrate and take time off to like connect with people and help them understand what you've learned and how you've grown as a result of the experience. It's just part of sharing your life.
Right, and you get to share with them. You're right in front of them. You're tangible, and it really makes a stronger connection. And then people think about what you've written or what you're talking about,
Right.
and come back to you with all sorts of new information that you hadn't considered before. So this really collaborative work that occurs not just because you've written the book, but the outcome afterwards.
Yeah.
I've made so many. Like, I've learned so much in the last 3 weeks while I've been on the book tour. Stuff I didn't even
Now,
know
was it your
about.
publicist that arranged the tour or the publisher, or how did that work out?
Actually, it was the publicist who also worked in conjunction with my husband because he's
Hmm.
working all over the country. And so we try to connect that. And then I'm speaking
Hmm.
all over the country. So we tried to work it out so that I
I
was
see.
doing
Yeah.
book.
So it's multifaceted. Wherever you go to speak, you arrange book stuff, and wherever he's going and you're going to go with him, you arrange book stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it makes it
Coordinate travel expenses and all that.
exactly. That's exactly it.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Well, you just inspired me. I think next time I get a book out there, I'm going to do a book tour. That sounds
I
fun,
think it
actually.
would be really fantastic because people would love to hear your stories and
Yeah.
also see you in person. And
That's neat.
that I think it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
thanks for that. Well, your story is fascinating. Let's go back to you, and I want to I'm always curious. Like, it's so unique, right? Not many people want to swim the highest lake in the world and get potentially eaten by piranhas or whatever the heck is in Lake Titicaca. Titicaca, right? When I read that, I was like, oh my God, it's like my worst nightmare. Like, not many people want to do that. What inspired you, Lynn, to like get into this open ocean swimming of these bodies of water that are just, no humans really think of swimming?
Well, actually, it was because a mother, when I was on a swim team in New Hampshire, when I was 8 or 9 years old, saw me swimming in the pool on a very cold, rainy day. And Mrs. Milligan saw me out there alone and said, I bet someday you're going to swim the English Channel. And I
Really?
just thought, if it's this much fun of just being on the water, in the waves, in the rain, in the hail on my own, I want to do that. And so
Right.
it took a long time, it seemed like, to come back and actually address that. But then my folks moved me, along with my siblings, to California so we could train with Don Gambrell, who was the Olympic coach. And
Hmm.
so he saw the potential in me and suggested
Olympic
that I,
coach for pool
for
swimming or
the,
for open?
yeah, for pool swimming, because
Okay.
there
Yeah.
wasn't any open water swimming then at
I
all.
didn't think so. Yeah.
No, but he was a pioneer and he basically adapted the training for pool swimming for Olympians to the ocean for me. And so
Hmm.
I trained, and if I was swimming 6 miles or 10 miles, my mom or my dad would walk along Long Beach,
Wow.
California, or Seal Beach or Huntington and help keep the pace for me.
I
And
saw that
so
you swam out to Catalina. So, I've taken the ferry out there and I've taken a rib out there. Tell me about that swim. That's a pretty cool, feat in and of itself.
It
as a
was really
kid? You were a
cool.
teenager, right?
Yeah, I was 14 years old, and I did it with two other 14-year-olds and one other 12-year-old. And we
Okay.
started at midnight because, at that time, the sea's calmer, the wind's down. And we
Right.
started around Divers Cove on the isthmus and headed toward the mainland. And
Okay.
it
So you
took
swam
us
back from Catalina to the
the
mainland.
first time I did it. And then the second time I did it, I swam the other direction because my brother held the record from the island to the mainland. So I decided I wanted to try to break the record
Of
from the
course,
mainland to the island.
you can't let him beat you. Do you have to worry about currents like sweeping you down toward Mexico with that, or how does that?
Actually, there are strong currents, and usually when you come into Palos Verdes area, if you're lucky to hit that along the California coast, there's always a strong current, and so some people will just be swept down and don't ever get in, and that's when you really have to turn on the endurance and work on the sprint and cut through the current and get to shore.
I
So
see.
when I did it the first time, I did it with a group of kids and it took us 12 and a half hours. The
12
second
and a half.
time I did it took me 8 hours and 48 minutes. And so I broke the overall time for that swim.
Incredible. Yeah.
But it was all about great guidance and navigation stuff about that helps you get to where you want to go. And you have to have really people that know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I last was in that body of water, I saw, I think, two different species of dolphins. I saw this, I don't know what kind of fish is called. It's like got a completely flat body, like a
Mola
monkfish or,
mola.
yeah, that's right. Um, a time before, we found a shark that had been cut in half by
Wow.
something. I don't know what.
Oh,
It must have been a propeller of a large ship, or
oh,
it was weird, and it was still alive. That's the
oh.
strangest experience there. So, anyways, my point is, I'm curious. What kind of wildlife did you see on these swims, and do you have any curious creatures who were like, what's this?
When I was training to swim Catalina the second time, I had a baby gray whale that was lost, and the fishermen on the pier in Seal Beach said, "Stay with him and help him find his mother." So I
No
spent
way.
5 hours out there and wound up writing a book called Grayson that's been translated into 23 languages
Oh
now.
my
But it's
god.
that story of you're 17 years old and the fisherman tells you, help him find his mother.
How cool is
And you
that?
don't think about how do you do that? You
Right.
just
Yeah.
go,
Exactly. How am I
okay.
supposed to know where mommy is? Right.
Exactly. So I've done that. Swum with dolphins, swum with sharks. Had some really close encounters, or one close encounter with a bronze whale or shark when I was swimming around the Cape of Good Hope at the tip of Africa. There was a 12-foot bronze whaler that came up for me, and I had along with me, guiding me, were special forces basically from the Cape Town Police Department.
Oh
And there
wow.
was one guy holding a spear gun named Doug who was being towed by a rope from a ski boat.
I
And he
see.
saw the shark and had to shoot the shark in the dorsal fin. And the shark bit the spear and pulled it out of its fin and then swam away. But we were 400 meters from shore, and the blood in the water started attracting other sharks.
Of course.
So I swam very quickly to shore, and then he explained that. That he had to shoot the shark because it was going to bite me. And so I asked, "Is the shark going to be okay?" And, and he said, "Yes, that's why I hit it in the dorsal fin." But
Oh wow.
these
Fascinating.
guys, they were just incredible. They went spearfishing there, knowing there were all sorts of sharks, white sharks in the area, and it didn't
Wow.
phase them at all. It's
Not at all, huh?
not at all.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I actually had a conversation yesterday with a surfer who had lost his leg to a shark, and didn't resent sharks. Actually, it turned his whole life around to conservation issues
Wow.
around sharks, and
Yeah.
and it was a really inspiring story. And got a bitten the second time, but the second time the shark bit his prosthetic leg, so didn't get much to eat that day. I know, right?
Where
What are the
was it?
chances of that, right?
What part of the world was he in?
Hawaii the
Oh
first
yeah.
time, and the second time I'm not sure actually. It wasn't Hawaii because it was on a photo shoot. That's fascinating. So each one of these expeditions that you did were highly coordinated. It wasn't like you're like, oh, I'm just going to jump into the Bering Sea and see if I can make it to Russia. I mean, you had chase boats and safety swimmers and stuff like that.
No,
Explain to us just
actually,
how it worked out.
well, I was really lucky because my dad had been in the Navy, been a corpsman on Iwo
Mm,
Jima and
okay,
Saipan to Dian. So he was all about preparation and
right,
training. And
right.
so he really helped me figure out how to get a team together to go with me on these different swims, how you pick a crew, how you get a group of doctors to make sure your swim in Antarctica is safe if it can
Mm-hmm.
be.
Mm-hmm.
And so the long-term acclimatization to the cold water was something that he taught me how to do to basically train for the English Channel. I was sleeping with my windows open at night to let the cool air in California. So it'd be mid 40s and I'd wear light clothes all day long. So in the winter and never a coat or wear a blanket so I could
Mm-hmm.
get my body temperature used to colder environment. And then
Interesting.
through the years, I kept stepping it down and going into colder and colder water. And the coldest I did was a swim off of Greenland in 26.6, just a
Oof.
quarter of a mile, but it was in a swimsuit cap and goggles. And it was so challenging across Disco Bay.
Yeah.
But again, it was like, why do you do it? And it's like I finally really came up to my mom was asking me this because she's an artist. She was an artist, and I just sort of said, well, so why do you create art? What is it that you? Why do you have to do that? And she
Mm-hmm.
looked at me and like, oh, I get it. I said it's basically because of who you are and
It's who you.
what you want to figure out what you're capable of doing. You
Right.
know, it's your song in the world,
That's right.
and I think that that's you have so many gifts that you're given, and then how do you hone that, and then how do you get a team of people around you that can complement that, and together you can do something that's never been done, and that's
Right.
what's so exciting because it's not just jumping in and swimming; it's figuring out how to do something like that, like the
Right.
swim across the Strait of Magellan. You know, getting in touch with the Chilean Navy and using their expertise and their frogmen to be able to help me get across through huge currents and whirlpools. That it's really exciting.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, it's like, why do people climb Mount Everest, or or do
Why do people do anything?
anything like that? It's because
Anything at all.
it's curious to the human spirit to see if it can be done, and then,
Exactly.
you know, what will you learn? How will you grow? You know what I mean? Like,
Like,
what's
why have you had the career that you've had? You know,
that's right.
why
Yeah.
haven't you just sort of gone with the mainstream?
Yeah, I could be back at the family business, running the family business, which has been around since 1798, which all my siblings are involved in, and yet no, Mark has to go off and be a Navy SEAL and get involved in teaching all this stuff. Yeah, I love that saying. It's your song in the world. I mean, gosh, that would be a great title for your next book, by the way.
Actually, there's well, this next book is called Tales of Al,
I
the
know. I
water
can't wait to
rescue
talk
dog.
about that. Yeah. I meant the book after that.
Oh, actually,
When you're ready to write it.
actually, there's already been done.
Good for you.
It's another water story, but it's a children's story, and it's about a sea turtle.
Oh,
So I
cool.
am so excited about it because I've never seen anything like this before. And the illustrator from England is a guy named Richard Jones, and has
Oh, cool.
done beautiful underwater illustrations and above water as well. But just to
Oh,
have that
huge. That's
kind
going to
of
be a huge success because kids absolutely love turtles, and they're so inspiring, I think. That's really
yeah.
neat. Well, good luck with that as well. I want to come back to Tales of Ale in a little while, but I'm not done kind of learning about like what motivated you and what you learned. And so what I want to talk about the Bering Strait, like, because that was in the height of the Cold War, and there's lots of news articles about that because Gorbachev mentioned it, in the INF signing with Reagan. I mean, what inspired that? What were the biggest challenges, and what did you learn from that?
Well, I think that the inspiration came from my dad because he explained that here's Little Diomede, United States, and here's Big Diomede, Soviet Union, and
Mm-hmm.
they're only 2.7 miles apart. So the
Mm-hmm.
two superpowers are neighbors in the world. It's
Right.
not, Moscow
Yeah,
and
most
the
people don't
U.S.
realize how close we are,
Yeah,
up in
it's like
Alaska.
you can be on Little Diomede and see the Soviet Union
Right,
right
and
there.
the reason Alaska is even part of the United States is because of Russia, right?
Right, Seward's Folly, because
Yeah,
Secretary of State Seward bought the Alaska from the Russians,
that's right.
and so he had a vision. But
That's right.
if it hadn't been, then that area could have been part of Russia, and
Right.
what would the world have been then like? Yeah, I studied history in college, and I also, when you're asking about inspiration, I think that one of the reasons I studied history and exercise physiology and a bunch of other stuff, but was because I really wanted to figure out how people become who they are and how they influence change in a positive way.
Hmm.
So, who was Gandhi before Gandhi, and who
Hmm.
was Amelia Earhart before she was
You know
who
what?
she
That's
was? And
exactly why I do this podcast, and that's why we're
oh,
having this conversation, because I am so fascinated with the primal urge or soul force that causes people to be who they are in spite of their parents, in spite of their upbringing, and in spite of all the forces that might work against them. Like why do people shape themselves? Like you said, to express your song in the world. It's fascinating to me.
It is. And I think that seeing their process and seeing how they achieved things that hadn't been done is so useful to figure out how can I make my way in the world. And
Right,
then beyond that, finding mentors who you just admire to help you get
right,
to where you want to go. I've been so fortunate that when I was a kid and I was swimming in a pool with Olympians and I was the last person and I hated being last. It just, I wanted to do something well. And here you're seeing excellence right there. And then to go over to, you know, Gary Hall, gold medalist, Hans Foshnot, gold medalist, Gunnar Larsson from Sweden, gold medalist, and ask them, how do you do butterfly? Will you watch me swim? And they would do it. They would help this little girl. I was no threat to them, but they
right.
would just like, sure, let me show you, let me help you. And I've done that all through my life. I've been so fortunate to have people, when I've been an author, being able to reach out to different authors. And Arthur Golden, who wrote Memos of the Geishas, like somebody wants me to write a blurb for them. How do you write a blurb? How do you,
Right.
stuff like that? And people are amazingly helpful, just,
Yeah, yeah,
and they know so much. And that's again back to your talk about, do you want to go to a book signing or a bunch of them? It's like, absolutely. Because people are all like, no, there are all these little worlds. And if you can just connect in one point, that just leads you another way. It's so
yeah.
incredible.
It is incredible, and I have this belief that there's 7.5 billion geniuses on this planet. There's also a
Oh,
few jerk geniuses, but they just need to evolve a little bit more. But everyone's got this intense creative capacity if they
right.
just
And all they
allow
need
it
is
to
a
flow.
little push or a
And they need a
little
little push
support.
sometimes, and belief,
Yeah.
and the push can come in many ways. It can be motivation, it can be belief, self-esteem, opportunity, right? Because
Opportunity.
the people right in Ukraine right now aren't necessarily saying, "Well, I'm a creative genius." They're thinking, "Holy shit, I got to make sure I don't get hit by the next missile coming in."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
life circumstances, opportunity, but at the fundamental level, every human being has this core capacity to be a genius. I think.
I think so. I think you're totally there. I think that that's so important that that people realize that there's something amazing and unique in each one of us,
Yeah.
and just given the right direction or the support or somebody just saying, "Yeah, you can do that." I was at a book signing a couple days ago, and there were two women that had done the English Channel, and there was this young man who was the boyfriend of one of them, and he came over to me and he said, I think I want to become a swimmer, but I've been afraid of the water. And I looked at him and I like, it's all about breathing. It's all about rhythm. It's all about being relaxed. And if you can do that, you can swim. But looking at you, you've got the body of Michael Phelps. You're
Right.
long, you're strong looking. And so I knew that he was like taking that all in and I'm going, yay,
Yeah.
he's going to
Yeah.
do this.
That's
He's going
awesome.
to,
Yeah,
yeah,
sometimes it's just one touch point, right, that can
yeah,
change the
exactly.
trajectory of a life. It's like
Yeah.
pushing a body in motion. It's like touch, and then suddenly, over time, it veers off in the right direction or a new direction. So back to the Bering Strait. Okay, so your father helped you understand that planning and coordination. You had this inspiration to see how other people live. By the way, I've read a little bit about that area, and most people might not really recognize this because our image of Russia is kind of like a Moscow and the gritty, funky hat wearing, white Anglo-Saxon kind of looking person that has this guttural language, and yet you go to the Far East, and people who live in that far is a Kamchatka Peninsula or whatever.
Kamchatka, yeah.
They're a lot like the Inuits. I mean, they look like the Alaskans. They talk like them. They're very Asian, very native. They're not very Russian. You know,
No, they're native. They're
they're
Inuit.
native,
They're
right?
they're people in Magadan. There are people all over the Soviet Far East that are native. But there are also many Russians that had been during the purges moved to Siberia.
Right.
So you have such an interesting mix of people that are really hardy people, really strong.
Living
And
largely independent. There's not a whole lot of interference from like the central control authorities out there because it's so far away, and really the only way to get there is often by rail, and there's not that many roads in Russia. I read yesterday there's only 790,000 miles of roads compared to 4 million in the United States, and the United States is like 40% of the size of Russia. So everything goes by train. That's fascinating, isn't it?
It
That's like,
is. It
yeah,
is. It is. There is a cultural vibrance there that I thought was interesting too, because you had all these Europeans that were sent to Siberia, and so you
right,
have music there, cultural classical music. You have great food. Who would have thought in Siberia? But there were a lot of people from France that and Italy that had been influenced. They were Russian, but they wound up in Siberia, and so
right.
we were eating food in Siberia, going, "This is really delicious."
I know.
Very different.
The other thing that was kind of interesting to me is that whole, we think of this is more philosophy, but we think of kind of Vedic philosophy as coming from India, but it extended all the way north into Siberia.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you find that same philosophy of the yogis in Siberia in the
Yeah,
East, which is
yeah.
fascinating.
It is incredible how ideas move and how they get held on to.
Right, right. Okay, so back to the swim. Like, you had to imagine coordinate. You didn't just show up on Russian soil, did you? Like,
No,
like
no.
crawl out of the ocean and be like, okay, what's this?
Well, there
Yeah,
had been actually, even though there was no border that you could see because the water, you can't have a border on the water,
yeah.
the Inuit who lived on Little Diomede were not permitted to go across that international date line, which was also the border. So the idea for me was I wanted to swim across from the United States to the Soviet Union to open the border for the
Yeah.
first time in over 40 years. And the Inuit on Little Diomede, couldn't cross that border. And actually, by mistake, it had been a foggy day, and some of the elders who were walrus hunters were in one of their umiaks, their walrus skin boats, and they'd strayed into Russian waters or Soviet waters at that time. And they were removed and taken to Siberia and put in prison for 52 days.
Oh my
And the
gosh.
people on Little Diomede were terrified that they would never see their loved ones again, but then they were released. But it reinforced that there is a border, that you don't cross it, that you can't stray, and that this is not a place that you go to. So
Right.
for me, it took 11 years because I was trying to
Wow.
get permission
Right.
to cross this border and to get it opened. And I wrote to Brezhnev and then Dropov and Chernenko and finally Gorbachev. But in the meantime, I wrote to senators and congressmen and State Department people and all sorts of people for 11 years. So
And
when
where
people
did the
say,
thaw come for you? I mean, I'm sure people just first threw the letter in the trash can, and then eventually, got some attention. But where was the breakthrough?
the breakthrough really came from Ted Turner.
Okay.
He was doing the Goodwill Games, and so I decided I'll write to Turner and ask him if he knows how to get a hold of the Soviets. And so he then put me in touch with a man named Bob Walsh, who was the one that was working with the Soviet Sports Committee on behalf of Turner. And he then put me in touch with some people, and then I contacted other people at the State Department, who then started to take me seriously. And then eventually I started building a team
Hmm.
of senators, of congressmen, of congresswomen, of people in the Soviet Union, at the Soviet Foreign Ministry, at the Sports Committee, at the U.S. It just,
Wow.
it was
It's a big
countless
deal.
hours. It was huge. It was obsessive. It was just,
Right.
I've got to figure out how to do this. And so, you do it for 5 years and 6 years and 7 years and 8 years. And finally, Gorbachev was coming out with the idea of glasnost, of openness. And
Right.
we were able to reach out to him finally and get his approval. But it was a huge journey. So somebody says, how long did it take? 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 11 years. And yeah, and so it
That's
was it
awesome.
was it was great
Oh my
because
gosh.
when they signed the INF missile treaty, Gorbachev and Reagan stood up and toasted the swim, and President Gorbachev said it showed how close to each other the two countries are,
Right.
and how the relations between the two countries are improving. And
That's
then
awesome.
shortly after that, the Berlin Wall came down, and friends of mine in Germany said because the Bering Strait border opened, because of that thought, then that influenced the wall coming down,
Right.
that people around the world saw this opening
We saw this
and then
opening.
went toward it. So it was a really long process. And
Hmm.
people decide they want to do a swim and they don't really realize how much preparation goes into it, especially when you're trying to do something that's politically
Yeah.
significant, that it's not
Right.
just an athletic event, that you're trying to
Right. You're
change
not
things.
you're not talking to the tourism bureau. You know what I mean? This is a
No,
big deal.
you're doing something much more significant. But the cool thing was that after the Bering Strait, I was able to go and do other cool swims, like
Right.
across the Beagle Channel between Argentina and Chile at a time when relations were really not good. And
Hmm.
because of that, I was able to get both countries to work together and allow the swim to happen. And then a few years later, when there were discussions happening about oil rights in the middle of the Strait of Magellan, they used the swim as an example of cooperation and detente. So they met on an oil rig, the Chileans and Argentines,
Mm,
and signed a treaty about oil rights in that
that's
area.
cool.
So
You know,
yeah, it's like people can take great ideas and just go further with them,
yeah.
and that's what you hope.
Have you considered? I don't know what form this would take, but I'm just thinking of the next generation who want to do really cool things that are both, speaking your song in the world as well as doing good for the world. Maybe an organization or nonprofit or something where you support young athletes who want to have a similar impact. How cool would that be to have?
It would be cool. Actually, I kind of do that a lot already on Facebook with
Mm-hmm,
whoever is reaching out to me for
uh-huh,
swims and for open water ideas, or they're trying to negotiate something they've not done before, and there's
mm-hmm,
political implications, and I'll
mm-hmm.
try to help with that. But right now, I'm still in my world of
Yeah,
trying to do more, to write more books, and to get out there and speak
to
and
do your thing, right?
inspire
Right.
others by speaking, from
Mm,
corporations to individual groups to, schools or universities. So
mm-hmm.
that's where I'm able to, sing my song in the world and influence people right now.
Yeah, that's cool. Huh. Okay, so you've done this all over the place. You're probably going to do more of it, and then let's shift focus. How did you learn about the rescue dogs? And when I read about that, I was so inspired, and I remember just vaguely, like a memory tickling the back of my brain that I'd come across this before, but I can't remember when or where. And most people aren't aware of the rescue dogs. They're aware of combat dogs, right? And the
Mm,
SEALs
yeah,
use those.
yeah.
But the rescue dogs is it's a whole different um, energy to it. And I think it's fascinating. So, how did you learn about these? And let's talk about the experience you had with the rescue dogs, or with Al himself.
Actually, the Italian water rescue dogs, there's a school in northern Italy
Okay.
where they're trained Newfoundlands, Labradors, Golden Retrievers, German
Yeah.
Shepherds, Leonbergers, and even Italian Spinoni, which are usually gun dogs that go out for hunting.
Mm-hmm.
They're all training to become Italian water rescue dogs. And I
Mm.
found out about them from a friend who was a swimmer. She said, "Oh my gosh, you got to look at this video." So I went online and saw a huge black Newfoundland leaping out of a red helicopter into a lake in northern Italy near Milan,
Mm.
or in Milan area basically. And so I just thought, how do they train a dog to do that? I mean, wouldn't the
And
dog
why
be
why not just a human doing it? I mean, what's the benefit
well,
for a dog to do it?
because with a dog, a Newfoundland can pull in six people at a time and more if
Really?
it's well trained. A lab, golden retriever, German Shepherd can pull in two to three people at a time. And so we just found out recently, my husband and I have been traveling across the United States for promoting the Tales of Al, the water rescue dog. And we found out that there's groups within the United States that are training their dogs, and also in Italy. And their qualifications are a lot different. But we found out that the dogs are trained to not be afraid of the sound of the helicopters. They are trained to basically not be afraid of leaping, because there's a progression that happens. And
Mm-hmm.
so much of it was so relevant to what I've done as an athlete, where, you don't just go off the 10-meter board
Yeah.
or 10-meter platform. You build up to it, just like when
Mm-hmm.
you were training for SEAL or swift
Right.
water rescue.
Right.
You basically built up gradually. So,
Right.
the dogs were trained to first go off the beach and then off a dock. And then
Mm-hmm.
if they have certain skills, they're allowed to go with the Italian Coast Guard on board the Coast Guard boats with their owners and leap off the pontoons of the Coast Guard boats and then off the bow of the boat. And then if they're connected to the Coast Guard and they're doing water rescue, then the helicopter's lowered so
Mm-hmm.
that the dog is like 10 feet off the water and can
Mm-hmm.
leap in, followed by the owner, who's also trained as a rescuer.
Mm-hmm.
And we found out from this young man that in Italy, there are few beaches that have any kind of lifeguards.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that are doing this are training all the time through spring and summer. And then they're also voluntarily patrolling the beaches in Italy along the coast, but also around the lakes. And they also have taken the school to Croatia, to
Mm.
Switzerland, to Germany, and helped other people doing this.
Yeah,
So
that's
that
cool.
it's a great kind of team, it's camaraderie. The people work with each other, the dogs help each other. but it's also something of themselves that they're giving and their dogs. And the dogs are eager to do it. That was the other thing. It's like, are they being forced to do this?
Right.
Are they happy? Are they being yelled at? What's going on? And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to go there. And I reached out to Donatella Pasquale, who was the vice president of the school. And I asked her, could I find out more? And she's like, come to Italy. So she was the one that spoke English very well and helped me observe them. And there was never a time where anyone shouted at any of the dogs or the people. No one was
Hmm.
ever reprimanded. No dog was ever reprimanded. It was always positive,
Hmm.
supportive. So they didn't just take a dog, like I've seen this before with puppies or with kids. And I can't stand it where an adult thinks it's okay just to throw a dog or a child in the water to get them to swim.
Hmm.
And all it does is terrify.
It terrifies them.
Not
Yeah, that's a
always,
bad
but
idea.
it does
Yeah.
often terrify the dog or the
Hmm.
child.
Hmm.
So their way of teaching the dog was the way, or the puppy, or the dog, depending on how old. It was the same way my parents taught us, my kid, my siblings, and our Dalmatian when I was a kid. The dog supported, the dog learns how to coordinate. I would pass the dog to you, you would pass the dog back to me. We'd go back and forth. As the dog swims, we give the dog less and less support, and eventually the puppy or dog is able to swim.
Right.
So there was always that constant caring, concern, never mean to the dog.
Yeah.
So that was the other thing is what happens if the dog doesn't want to do what it's told to do?
Right.
They don't make it do it.
They don't make a deal. I
No.
have a. I'm curious. I was in Egypt a few weeks ago for a school trip. I'm going back to get my PhD in global leadership and change right now from Pepperdine. And we had this international policy trip, and we happened to go to Egypt. And so one of our visits was to the Interior Ministry, which for Egypt is a big deal. It's kind of like their combination of their military and FBI and whatnot, because a lot of their focus is on internal security. And they gave us a dog and pony show, quite literally, right? We literally had this one exhibit where they were on horses and basically spearing targets on the ground, which was difficult to do while they were galloping. And then they took us to the dogs, and the dogs were trained to hunt for bombs, so like EOD dogs, and also to police dogs, right, to get the bad guy kind of thing. And what I noticed is the dogs really need to be extrinsically motivated. I mean, after every act that they performed, they were quite excited, but they got a treat. And I'm curious with because I've heard stories of dogs pulling their owners out of ice lakes, when they broke through and doing all these things where they got no extrinsic motivation to be helpful to a human being. And so I'm curious with these rescue dogs, and I imagine they do use treats to help them, right? But I'm wondering if they do it for intrinsic motivation versus like the police dogs or the EOD dogs.
They did it with praise. And that was what I
With
thought was
praise.
so interesting. And the other
They
thing
didn't
was
need a treat after
they
a training
didn't,
session.
their treat was to get the praise, the pets, the accolation. And
Oh,
that was
that is
also really
that's
interesting
really
when
cool. Right.
the thing that I thought was so fascinating is I said, after you do something where you've trained really hard, you get to play with toys. Do you get to throw the tennis ball and does she swim after the tennis ball? And they're
Hmm.
like, no. I said, they don't get to play with toys. It's like, no, never. I'm like,
Really, they
why
don't want
not?
to. I want. Yeah, why not?
Because they said we have to be more interesting and exciting than the toy. We want to develop a really strong bond with a dog. So if we play with toy, that's a distraction. We want the focus on us and we want to be focused on the dog. So that
That's
was what
fascinating.
else. It was also interesting when a dog could only get to a certain skill level, they would attempt the skill two more times, so three times in total. And then if the dog couldn't get it, then they'd step it down and do something the dog could do so the dog would succeed at it. And then he would come back to it another time. Or if you were successful with your dog to get it to do a certain thing that you needed to do for the skill for the water rescue dogs, then I would give you my dog and you'd work with my dog.
I
And so
see.
there was this dog mentorship, but there were also employed the dogs to help each other, which
Hmm.
I thought was really fascinating
That
because,
is fascinating.
it's like, how cool is that? So you get
Hey,
this.
watch me. This is how you do it.
Exactly. And they go in packs, they follow each other, they're aware of each other, and they do help each other out. And it was really fun to watch. And then to see each personality of the different dogs, but also the physicality of each dog is different. Like the Newfoundlands had these bow shaped chests just like a boat. And they
Right.
had web feet and they
Really?
swam in an inverted breaststroke. So when
Huh.
they swam, they just moved through the water.
Right.
And then the golden retrievers were just at ease, like the little old ladies in the water or little old men
Yeah.
just
My
swimming
family
along.
back east has Goldens, and we spend the summer on Lake Placid, or they do. I used to, and the Goldens are always in the water. They just love the water.
Yep, yep. And they just are happy to be there and they're
Yeah.
happy to retrieve people.
Yeah.
And it's really cool.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating. So why Ale? Was that a particular dog that you connected with? It's a real character, this Ale?
She was
Or
owned
she?
by Donatella, and she Donatella had had a dog named Alicia before, who was known in Italy, in Japan, all throughout Europe. She'd been on TV. She was a star, and she was known for rescuing so many people.
Wow.
So as Alicia started to fade, Al was brought into the family. And
Hmm.
so the thought was that Donatello would get Alicia to help teach Al to become a swimmer and to become a water rescue dog. But the problem was that Al just didn't seem to be getting it. And that's sort
Hmm.
of the core of the story, where you have what seems to be a delinquent dog.
Hmm.
But just like any great coach, Donatello could work with all the dogs and all the owners and figure out what it was they weren't quite getting and then help them reach that level that they wanted to get to. She wasn't able to figure out how to get to Al. So she just
Hmm.
kept trying and she kept patiently working at it. And then she'd take input from friends. And so the story is really about how does this amazing person translate that and help the dog reach her potential.
Mm.
So yeah,
That's
it
cool.
was so, and I was there for about 10 days, so I was able to see a transformation
Right.
and the process of what was going on, and that's really what interests me a lot in life is that process. How
Yeah.
does somebody become a great musician? Where do they start and go from there? A painter when they're sketching. My mom was an artist, so I'd watch her paint and start off with a sketch and then watch it evolve into an incredible painting.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. I love seeing a person who is afraid of the water swim. I mean, like that is like one of the greatest gifts you can ever see. Because to me, swimming is like one of the most important life skills, and the other
Yeah.
one's reading.
I
But those
agree.
two things
Yeah.
in life, together.
Oh, that's cool. It's interesting. Sometimes we don't see our own progress, our own skill. My wife took up painting a few years ago, and like she's, in my estimation, she's bringing home masterpieces. Of course, maybe I'm a little biased. And she's like, "Oh, I'm not that good. My teacher helped me a lot." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, take a look at this. If I had produced this, what would you be saying?" And she's like, "Well, yeah, you're right. Anyways, I don't know why that popped in my head. I'm thinking, oh, you know why? Because I was thinking when you're describing the story of Elle, like that would make a great children's book.
Yeah, and it may.
Just the story of like, lack of confidence and how, mentorship and support, you kind of holding the mirror up to the dog. She's starting to learn, oh yeah, maybe I can do this, which is
Well,
so important for
but it's
kids.
also it's an interpretation of what people are thinking about, and the
Right.
way she's responding are not really what's happening.
True. Yeah. That's
So
interesting. Yeah.
there's something else, like you looking at this dog as a delinquent, but she is really special. And I
Oh,
think that
cool.
that's something that happens with people all the time. It's like,
Right.
oh, that person's on the spectrum, or and you're saying that you're not saying it, but somebody's saying that in a negative way, and then suddenly you realize this person's extraordinary.
Right. And the,
And
and the person just needs someone else to see their extraordinariness because they maybe
right,
can't see it in themselves.
right, and so that person has to understand that and understand something, some signal that occurs where there's this transformation, where
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
understanding that, okay, you didn't get how special this person really
Yeah.
is.
It's interesting. Like when I'm thinking of teaching right now, and it's like we select teachers based on technical competence, but the most important skill is to recognize the intelligence of each student, right?
Yep.
They should
Yep.
qualify them for that. It's like, can you recognize the intelligence and the genius in your students or not? If you
Because it's
can't,
not
then
just about parroting information, it's
right,
about taking that information and thinking about it and coming back with something more.
right. So cool. We got to wrap this thing up here, unfortunately, because it's been so much fun. But so you're on this book tour. Tales of Elle is out, and people can find it anywhere. What if someone wanted to book you for like a part of to make a stop or to come visit their town, is that possible? Or,
The
if a
book
bookstore owner wanted to contact you, like, what do we do?
Well, you can go to www.lynne, Lynne, Cox.com, and you can reach us that way. And then I can put whoever in touch with my publicist. If it's speaking, then that's the same thing if you want to have me come speak.
Check.
The tour itself is pretty much set,
Yeah.
and you can
Okay.
go online there and see what the tour is. So now I did a West Coast tour. I'm on the East Coast tour, which is second stage.
Hmm.
And then I go to the Midwest, which includes Chicago, St. Paul, St. Louis, and Kansas City. And then
Nice.
from there, I go to Lake Lake Chelan, and to Seattle, and then back down to Southern California and San Diego area. And then there'll be other stuff probably
When are
there.
you coming to San Diego, by the way?
San
That's
Diego, I haven't posted it yet. I will be going to Carlsbad area.
that's where I am right now.
Oh, okay,
Wish I
okay. I'll
would
be
love
there
to
at the
buy you a
live.
cup of coffee.
I'll be at the Dove Library there, so that'd be great to
Yeah,
see you there. That'd
let
be
us
fabulous.
know. Let me know. We'll talk after this. I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to come say hi to you when you do
I
that.
think we're just about ready to post the date on that. So if anyone wants to come to any of the signings and get it book signed for them or themselves or their family, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, cool.
And it's been incredible the amount of people turning out. I think so many people would love to see you in person and have you sign books and talk to them. I mean, your
That's cool.
experiences
I'm
in
going to
life.
take you up in that, and well, not that you are challenging me or anything, but I'm going to do that. I want to get out more and talk to people. I think,
Yeah,
especially since the pandemic, and now that we're all virtual, and you're in your house, I'm stuck in my office. We're a virtual company, but I'm still stuck in my office because we have this, like, we can't get out of our lease, and so I'm figuring, well, I might as well use it. And I've got my podcast studio here, and I've got my gym and my Aikido mats, and I've got my hyperbaric chamber, so it's like my little man pad,
that's great. But then
place to go
maybe,
every day.
yeah, but then maybe you can do a tour with Jeff as your tech guy on the road
Yeah. No, I think that's a great
and
idea. Do
and connect
podcasts
with.
from the road. That's a
Why not?
great
That's what I'm
idea.
saying. It's like connect it all together. How
Yeah,
cool!
I love it.
Then you get to be the mobile person, get to go see people along the way.
Right.
You know, there's a great program. I love it. Feed Phil. It's this guy who did Everyone Loves Raymond, and he goes around the world eating food in different countries and learning about the culture and learning about the cuisine and taking you on this great travel
Oh, that's
adventure.
absolutely genius.
So, what a cool thing that you get to go see the person that got bitten by the shark and where he swims and surfs and bring that to people as well. It's a great series on YouTube.
I
You could
think
do
that's
something like that,
brilliant.
maybe.
I
Cool.
think it's brilliant. Yeah, all right. I could organize it where like half my year is doing that, and the other half is back home with the family. That's awesome. Well, Lynn, so your next book on the turtles, you're going to get on that when you're done with this tour and
Right. So right now it's just really
just
out
focus
there
on these.
talking
Yeah.
about Tales of Al, the water rescue dog, and also about Italy and the cuisine of Italy, because a lot of the stories emerged during this wonderful meal after spending time in training. You know, when you're an athlete, you get together and you debrief and you talk about what worked
Mm-hmm.
and what didn't work over a glass of wine and some
Oh,
food.
I
And
love it. Sandy and I love Italy. We love Tuscany, and I was just talking to Jeff this morning about um, buying houses in Italy for $1, right? And there's this, one of the revitalization initiatives, right, is to sell some of this old rundown properties to anybody who wants to buy it for like dirt cheap, as long as they improve it and hopefully move there and contribute to the economy. And I was like, well, that would be kind of fun, actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many things you can do in your life.
Oh my God, you're right. Yeah, so much to do, such little time. Lynn, it's been a true pleasure. Thanks so much for giving us your time today.
Likewise, Mark. Thanks so much for including me in your
Yeah,
interviews and all that. It's been really cool.
yeah. Well, everyone's going to love it. And LynneCox.com, right? Is that it?
That's
Did I
it.
get that
Lynn
right?
with the E.
Lynn with an E. So how I spell that? Lynnne.
Yep.
Cox.com. What about social media?
I'm on Facebook all the time and
Okay.
a little bit on
It's
Instagram.
just your name, though, at Lynne
Just
Cox?
my name. And
Got it.
I'm the picture of me is in the pool with my yellow Labrador, who's
Nice.
passed on, but I used to swim with him all the time.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's sweet. All right, Lynn. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Take care.